And so it's amazing, pretty much anything that you can think of. What do you want to do? The major barrier to learning something new is not intellectual. It's not the process of you learning a bunch of little tips or tricks or things. The major barrier is emotional. We're scared. Feeling stupid doesn't feel good. In the beginning of learning anything new, you feel really stupid. So the major barrier is not intellectual, it's emotional. But put 20 hours into anything. Doesn't matter. What do you want to learn? You want to learn language? You want to learn how to cook? You want to learn how to draw? What turns you on? What lights you up? Go out and do that thing. It only takes 20 hours. Have fun.
Hello. That was Josh Kaufman up front talking about his book and the book that we're talking about today, which is The First 20 Hours, How to Learn Anything Fast. Yeah. So this is a great book. I want to dive right into it. And I just want to, before we start, kick it off by saying this is on books. And if you've never listened before, that's cool. I'm going to give you a little summary of the book. And if you have read this before, also cool, because I'm going to share you a little extra content, a little extra nuggets, a little extra context about how it applies to me, about things that I've specifically learned from it. And you can compare it and go, oh, cool! I didn't quite get that from the book. So that's what I'm doing here. Speaking of this podcast, this thing that we're listening to right now, this is for me is in a way a learning experience. How to Learn Anything Fast is the title of this book, and I read these books, and I don't know if you've had this experience, probably, where you've read a book and then you put it down, and then someone asks you about the book, a few months later or something, or even like a week later, and you're like, oh yeah, I don't. Oscar Wilde was from Puerto Rico, right? He dies at the end of the book, doesn't he? It's in the title, right? Or something like that. You read a book and then you're like, it starts fading. I believe it's, for me at least, it's because the way I retain knowledge is I can model something, I can read it, I can get it. And often with books, we don't have a chance to apply that knowledge. And that, for me, and for a lot of people, is when the knowledge starts to kick in, right? You've probably heard teaching. Teaching is, if you can teach something, you finally know it by the time you can teach it, right? That's how you get to the place of some kind of mastery or something. And that's where I'm coming from with this podcast, and it relates to this book on such a meta level, where I want to, these books that I have on here, I want to be more intimate with, or that's weird, but I want to be more excited about. I want to know more about. I want to go deeper than just reading them once. I want to reread them. I think there's so much that I've learned from rereading, and having to explain these books or chat with people and friends and authors during this process has been really, really great. So that brings me to talk about the books that I choose here, because this book, I clearly chose this book, and all the books on books I choose. I personally don't like reading bad reviews. I often don't like to read reviews of movies before I go to see them, or books, or it's not because I don't want it spoiled as much as I want to just make up my own mind about it. And I'm telling you this because as you're listening, I want you to know that if I'm presenting a book, it's because I'm excited to talk about it. It's because I think there's something in it that was valuable to me, and that changed how I thought and learned about life. And I think that there's stories in books that other people relate to that maybe I don't get. And I'm like, can we sit down and talk about that book? Because you love it. I read it and didn't get it. Tell me how it affected your life. That's what this is about. I'm not trying to say, hey, I'm going to rate this book or review this book. It's good or bad. That's the whole premise of this. And it's been a great learning experience, a way to learn quicker, right? That brings me to this book. There's parts of this book I love, and there's parts of this book that I just didn't get so much out of. And I will be upfront to say what I got from it, but I want to not say that this is some kind of book review. I want to point to the ththings that were really valuable. And so in the deconstruction or the reflection of how this book affected me, which is what this show is about, I'm going to focus mostly on the first 40 pages. I find that there was a lot of value kind of chunked like deep in these first 40 pages. And then the rest of the, 200 so pages go on to the author, Kaufman, Josh Kaufman. He goes on to like apply this kind of theory that he has to these different disciplines of yoga, of coding, of I don't know, different kinds of things. So that to me wasn't as interesting. It just didn't work in written form. I feel like if there was a video of it, and maybe he has a video or something, it would have been more interesting. But I don't know, just reading about someone coding and having already known how to code and do yoga myself, it just didn't really apply. But the first 40 pages of the first 20 hours, that's what this is about. And so, yeah, I'm going to bring you that right now. So let's cue that transition music and get started to the main learnings. All right, here we go. I came to this book a few years ago during a period of time when I think I was just trying to learn too many things at one time. I was just curious how to use my time better. I think I just read or reread Getting Things Done. I was in that kind of mindset of like, how do I get more things done? How do I learn more efficiently? And especially running an education company, how do I then share that with my students? Like, this is where my mind was at the time. My friend Alexis, he came really excited and shared this book with me the first 20 hours. He's a big fan of Josh Kaufman's because he had also read the Personal MBA, which is another book by the same author, where Josh Kaufman, he's like, you don't need to go for 2 years to get an MBA and spend all that money. He's like, here are the main things that you can get from that time. He hadn't actually gotten an MBA himself. It's in the book. He basically explains he took that money and invested it in himself. He read just all the top books, did research, and put together what he believes are the top ways to like learn an MBA quickly, a business degree, right? MBA, master's in business, right? So that was his vibe there. I heard Tim Ferriss say a similar thing too. When Tim Ferriss was going to go do his MBA, he's like, I think I can learn quicker if I reinvest that money, that you would spend, whatever it is, $100,000 in myself. And he took that money and traveled the world. He tried starting companies and did all this stuff. He has a really nice blog post about that. Those are two people are especially inspirational in, accelerated learning quicker, right? And so from that, then Josh Kaufman from the Writing the Personal MBA came and wrote this book. And and my friend Alexis, he's like, hey, you got to check this out. I think this is going to be really inspiring to you. And the first page, I'm just going to read, it really just spoke to me, and maybe this will resonate with you, about time and skill, the two things that I want the most right now, right? So here it goes. Josh Kaufman writes, there's so much I want to do and so little time. The story of modern life. Take a moment to consider how many things you want to learn to do. What's on your list? What's holding you back from getting started? Two things most likely, time and skill. Here's an uncomfortable truth. The most rewarding experiences in life almost always require some level of skill. That's true. I feel that. Skills take some time and effort to master. Time we don't have, and effort we're reluctant to contribute. Right? So it's like, if you want to do anything, like, it's easy to buy a guitar, but you have to invest a little bit of time to make it worth having that guitar, right? And he goes into diagnosing a lot. He has like a lot of terms that I think he's making up here, like frustration barrier is this first one that comes up. So the idea that there's a period of time in which you're horribly unskilled and painfully aware of it. That's the frustration barrier. And then you basically give up before you ever get off, get your feet. And then you're like, I hate doing that. Right? So many of my students learning to code, they'll just give up in the first, few days of it because they'll hit a barrier. Motivation is a really difficult part of learning, but that's kind of like a side tangent. But yeah, so he's trying to say, like, I'm going to make a term for that, and I'm going to talk about it, because if we're aware of what's in the path to learning, we'll be better prepared. Have you heard of this idea of 10,000 hours, the 10,000 hour rule? It's often credited to Malcolm Gladwell because he talks about it in his book Outliers. Although it was another guy, I think Anders Ericsson or something, some guy that did research on it. And the premise is that it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. That's about 5 years working full time. If you want to become an expert at an expert teacher, if you want to be an expert yoga instructor, if you want to be a neuroscientist, whatever it is, it's going to take you 10,000 hours. And in Outliers, they study how the Beatles, the amount of time that they put before they actually got recognized, because most people, they don't get recognized for the 10,000 hours of crap they put into the world. It's like, oh yeah, the Beatles, they're coming to America. It's this new thing. And nobody saw that they had been playing every single night for all these years in Hamburg, right? That's what the 10,000 hour rule is about. So that kind of got ingrained into our brains, or at least my brain, about 6 years ago when Outliers came out. And he's like, the author here, Josh Kaufman, he's like, yeah, that's bull. He's like, yeah, there's some truth that the 10,000 hours that's how long it takes if you want to be an expert at something. But what if you just want to learn something? He's like, everybody, you're all confusing this idea of the 10,000 hours rules. That's about mastering something. He was like, you can just still learn something, and I'll tell you how long it takes. It takes 20 hours, and that's where the title of this book comes from. What Kaufman means by learning, like what we're going to do in this 20 hours, is this process of rapid skill acquisition. It's a process. It's a process of breaking down a skill, something that you want to learn, into the smallest possible parts, identifying which of those are the most important, and then deliberately practicing those first. So this rapid skill acquisition, it's deciding what you want to do, deconstructing it into the smallest possible skills and sub-skills, and learning enough about each of those sub-skills to be able to practice them intelligently. It also means removing any barriers that get in your way and putting in the time to practice, about 20 hours to practice this. And from there, by doing this rapid skill acquisition, by deciding and all this stuff I'm talking about, deciding what you want to do in this process, you come out of it with a level of like functional, I don't know that he actually defines exactly what he promises, but it's more or less you're going to have this ability to self-edit, like so that you'll know enough about, let's say, learning Spanish, right? I took Spanish in high school for about 4 years. Learn nothing. All right, I'm horrible at Spanish. And I know a lot of vocab words, but I don't know how to speak it, right? What Josh Kaufman would say about my Spanish is that it sucks. And he'd also say it's because there's better ways to learn. There's better ways to do that, like learning through speaking, right? Like learning through actually speaking in a different country and immersion. Striking up as many conversations with, Spanish people as possible, setting up Skype, all this kind of stuff, deconstructing what I wanted to do with it, which isn't something that high schools teach me. You just you just want to pass, right? You just want a passing grade. But that's not a real like motivating goal, right? Again, motivation, like why am I taking this? And if you don't know where you're going with learning, you just tend to put in all these hours and you don't know the level that you're trying to go at. I was trying to learn Spanish earlier this year, and I just wanted to be good enough so that I could understand the cab driver when I went to Buenos Aires, because I had went last year to Nicaragua and I was just embarrassed. Just like I literally couldn't even tell the guy where to go with directions. So that was just like a small, like if I could do this, and that helped me focus. It helped me learn vocabulary words specifically around cab stuff, right? Or like airport, like getting in the cab, or you could really break it down. And there's also like a little feeling of success when you do that versus when you're just learning to learn, like in high school, and you're like, yeah, I'm just learning these things. I never would feel accomplished, even though I got a D at one time actually, but mostly B's, but just horrible grades in high school Spanish. So having a clear goal, these are some of the principles of getting to a place of learning in 20 hours. All right, I'm going to go through my favorite part of the book, which is chapter 3, 10 Principles of Effective Learning. I'm going to share some of these principles. I think they'll be really applicable if you listen right now and you follow along, thinking with something that you could learn or that you've been wanting to learn. What have you been wanting to learn? Is there something you're trying right now? Is there something, piano or writing or, a yoga lesson or something you want to take? Pilates. I don't even know what that is, but I think it's like yoga, but you do plank for 60 minutes. I'm not actually sure, but maybe I could learn that. Well, whatever it is that you want to learn or you're curious about, think about that thing as we go through the 10 principles. And hopefully this will help you get excited about learning and being able to deconstruct that and hit your goal. So these are the 10 principles. And as I go through this, I need you to promise me one thing, though. I need you to promise that you're going to have a growth mindset about this. I need you to promise and understand that you can learn. You need to be motivated and confident that your mind, that you are capable. We can't, here's the thing. Can we talk for a second? Here's the thing. I teach coding. Sometimes people will show up to class and they'll do it for 2 hours and they'll be like, yeah, I'm just not a coding kind of person. It's just not, my brain doesn't work that way. Everybody's brain is plastic. Neuroscientists, there's been lots of research have talked about anyone can learn a new skill. There's not a certain type of person, right? There's a whole book written about this, which I may talk about in another episode, called Mindset. It's the idea of a growth mindset. It's just the kind of person that has the belief that they can learn new skills if they put in practice, versus somebody with a fixed mindset who assumes that talent is, you're born with it. You're born with that talent, right? I can never do that. So none of this book, none of you learning anything, is going to really be as effective if you're not coming into it with, okay, I can do this. Like science says, my brain is plastic and can learn. It just takes the motivation. It just takes me getting through and committing to the 20 hours. And so hopefully these tips, these principles I'm going to give you now will help you. And I promise they're going to be a lot more effective if you can really just see it in yourself to go through with this. So, all right. So this is the 10 principles of effective learning. I'm going to give you the few that really affected me and that I found the most valuable. So number 1 was research the skill and related topics. So what this means is just know your goal, know a little bit of research, like spend 20 minutes browsing the web or talking to somebody. I find that really helpful if you can talk to somebody in the field or doing what you're trying to do. I'm trying to, I'll give you my example so you can see how it applied to me. I'm trying to write a web series right now, and I'm trying to just figure out, there's a lot of moving parts from scripting this thing to getting actors to all the different things, to video cameras and getting it live and marketing, all this stuff. I have some experience with a few of those things, but there's some holes. There's some things that I haven't quite done that are new to me and I'm trying to learn more about, such as the screenwriting process. So for me, just knowing, okay, what's the goal that I have to do here? And the goal for me is just basically, I know I want to get about 4 episodes and I want them to be about 5 minutes in length each. And I want it to be somewhat comedic. Like just having constraints sometimes will help you. So know what you're trying to accomplish and research, talk to somebody about your idea. I think that will help you save a lot of time. So that's one I found very useful. Number 2 on this list, and this is my all-time favorite from the list and from the book, I think this is one of the biggest, most influential things for me. Jump in over your head. So what this means is that if there's something that you want to learn, and it seems like, panicking, it seems so foreign to you, just go and start, get as close to the source as you can. One example I'll give you of my students when they're learning to code, you could start with learning to code and just learn for an hour or two the basics, super fundamental basics, like the ABCs. Or you could, shadow somebody so I'll have a video where in 15 minutes I go from idea to launching something live on the internet. And it's really cool because you can see how all of the whole system works, right? As somebody that's new. And that's really helpful because it really immerses you in the learning process. Otherwise, if you're learning to code and you just see the ABCs, you're like, how am I ever going to use this stuff? Where is this going, right? I'm really frustrated. Students get really demotivated. For me, it was the same thing with Spanish, trying to learn Spanish. And I'm like, why? I'm never going to Spain. I'm 15. I'm never going to Spain. I don't need this. This is bull. If only I knew back then. So knowing, like, just going into the thing of like where you're going to use it is so valuable. Another example for me, and just to give examples to really like help inspire you, is trying to write the screenplay right now, and trying to write I keep calling it a screenplay, but it's really just a web series. Is I could have, this is a good example. Like, think about it this way. How would you learn to make a web series? I think when I had that question, I was like, I could spend the next 3 months writing, and then the next, because I have a lot of ideas and I have all these things I want to do, and then, finally show it to somebody, and then finally try to like find actors and learn how to use a camera, or like whatever it is, like one thing after another. Or, and this is what I did, from learning from this book, from Jumping Over Your Head, or I could try to do that all in one weekend, right? And that's what I did. I was like, what if I had to do the whole thing from writing to getting some friends together to filming it to editing it all in one weekend? Of course, the end product wasn't going to be as great, as if I'd spent a little more time on it, maybe 2 weekends, maybe a little more. But what I learned is more valuable. And what I learned is what I enjoy doing in the process, what I don't enjoy doing, where my strengths were, where my weaknesses were. I'm pretty strong with editing and the camera stuff. And then I was like, I need a little more work with the writing thing. That's where I need to put my resources. It really helps to just jump in over your head, and it may feel scary. And like, I sure felt like, whoa, who am I to be doing this? I've never done this before. Are my friends going to laugh when I show them, or just not understand it? Am I going to get demotivated? Am I going to even like this? Like, I just had so many doubts. So pushing through it, again, I guess it sounds a little easier than it is, but jump in over your head. What is that thing that you can do, right away? I really love that. And finally, from the list of 10, I'm just going to give one more. Create scaffolding and checklist. So I like to make, as I do processes, I like to make little notes. I put them in Evernote, but you could put them anywhere. And I'll just put like little recipes of, so these are the 3 steps toward, for character development or whatever it is if I'm writing, or these are the 7 steps toward exporting a rendered file from Adobe Premiere and getting it online. Having these processes written down, having notes, even the act of having to write them, I think keeps it in my head better than just doing. So reflecting on it and writing scaffolds and checklists. So basically, these are the steps towards doing this after I do this, so that I always approach it in the same way. So that's a really great tip in here as well. So that's my challenge to you, just these 3 steps. This is enough to get you going. So what do you want to learn? Write it down, be very clear about it, do a little bit of research tonight on what that is. Number 2, how can you jump in over your head? Just call somebody. Find that thing you want to learn, call somebody or email somebody and ask them one question. That's your push of the day, of the week. Just do that this week. And you'll find that people are much more receptive to helping you if you're just curious and kind. So just do that. I think that will help you get a long way. And then when you're learning, you'll learn something in the first few hours. Just start to write down a process. What were the 3 steps, every time that you have to, whatever you're doing, right? Write those down. That will be your homework in this episode. I would love to let me know what you're trying to learn. Shoot me an email, shoot me at Twitter @OnBooksShow. Thanks again for listening to On Books. If you enjoy On Books, please subscribe on iTunes. It's free. You can get all the show notes at on-books.com. There are a bunch of other books that I've covered, from Sex at Dawn to Blink to Mating in Captivity, Letters to a Young Poet. Check them out. They're up there. And if there's any books that you'd like to suggest to me, you can do that at OnBooksShow. That's on Twitter, @OnBooksShow. My personal account's @Castig, that's CASTIG. I'm on Facebook if you want the updates when the new episodes go out. That's facebook.com/OnBooksShow. And thanks so much for listening. I'm going to play us out with a bit from Josh Kaufman's TED Talk. This is the end of the TED Talk. He learns in his exploration of learning, he learns that A lot of songs are just the same 4 chords. A lot of pop songs are just the same 4 chords. And he's learning the ukulele, and he's like, oh, I didn't know that if I just learn these 4 chords, I could play like 20 songs immediately. And so that's what this is. And yeah, jumping in over his head.
Just a small town girl living in a lonely world. She took the midnight train going anywhere. I heard that you settled down, that you found a girl, that you're married now. Every night in my dreams I see you, I feel you. That is how I know we'll go on. I won't hesitate no more, no more. It cannot wait, I'm yours. 'Cause you are amazing. We did amazing things. If I could, then I would. I'd go wherever you will. And can you feel the love tonight? Can you live with or without you? When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. Sometimes I feel like I don't have a partner. No woman, no cry, Mama, this surely is a dream. I come from London under. Once a jolly swag man camped by a billabong. Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy. But here's my number, so call me. Hey, sexy lady, whoop, 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 whoop 'em Gangnam Style. Time to say goodbye. Closing time. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end.